Okay, it's gonna have a little like
green
Okay.
circle.
Yep.
Yeah,
Okay.
we're up.
Okay, let me find my remote so I can see the screen. I found it.
Alright.
I
And-
posted the link on the text channel so you guys can share it.
Okay. Hello, everyone, to the Hoppean Book Club, episode 6. We're doing the final chapters of Economics in One Lesson, and yeah, we're gonna be getting through our first book.
Yep. These are the last 2 chapters of Economics in One Lesson.
Yep. I finally figured out how to do the Discord overlay, so woot woot, you guys can finally see who is talking. So you should also be able to more easily see who is here: Colton, Emo, and Kyle.
Yep.
Alright, so you got anything you want to say, or do you want to jump right into it?
I was gonna let them.
Yeah, let's just wait a minute or two to let people jump in.
Yeah, I was going to wait and then also do my usual explain the podcast, suggestions, that type of stuff. So this podcast is where a bunch of people from the Hoppean read a book and summarize it, talk about it a little bit more. We're going to be having more people in the future. It's just that right now is a really busy time for some people. So we want a discussion with the chat, so post questions in the live chat. Also, if you post a comment, we should see it, and we should be able to address it in the next stream. We do want suggestions of books, with the theme being Austrian economics and libertarianism. Other schools of libertarianism will be covered in the future, but we want to get the main books of the Austrian school done. Since this is the last episode for this book, the next book is going to be The Anti-Capitalist Mentality by Mises. It's a good introduction to Mises, and it's brought up a lot in other books as well, The Anti-Capitalist Mentality. So actually reading it will help us in the future when we get to those references.
It's also fairly short.
Yep. We also have some clerical announcements. We're going to be taking a week off as we change books, so it's not going to be next week, but 2 weeks from now that we start the next book.
Yeah, I didn't talk much in these episodes that we did because I didn't have time to read this book, but hopefully I will be able to read the next one, so I'm gonna be participating more as well.
Yep. Yeah, no. I don't know how your guys' weekends have been, but I just got through the book of Ezekiel and Lamentations today, and I swear if I have to read or hear roundabout one more time, I'm going to lose my mind. Like, the entire book of Ezekiel is all about roundabouts as he's describing a house.
I don't recall the contents of that book since I haven't read, Bible in ages.
Yeah, but it's just he's telling you like how the place is laid out and like the measurements of certain rooms and areas, and he's like, it's so and so feet roundabout, measured roundabout, and then it's over there roundabout, and it's just like every sentence like has roundabout in it. at least I'm exaggerating, but that's how it feels like.
Is that the construction of the temple or something.
I believe so.
I
Yeah.
forget.
Yeah. I think he's also talking about a house because I do remember that, but it might be the house of God.
Seems likely.
It's just it was kind of mind numbing, with all the talk of measurements roundabout, and it's over there roundabout on the corner.
Be a roundabout.
Oh,
No, yes
so
is in my head.
so we
We got
got
5 people
watching.
already.
Yeah,
We got
I
5.
got 6.
Yeah, 6
So
now.
yeah.
You want to go ahead
So
and start?
yeah, 3. I guess this is your chapter email.
Yep. This
So
was a long one, but if we're all ready to
salt and
start, I
savings.
can go ahead. Yep. If we're all ready to start, I can go ahead and start.
Yep.
Yep.
All right. So, from the beginning of time, proverbial wisdom has taught the virtues of saving and warned against the consequences of squandering and waste. But there has always been squanderers and theorists who will rationalize the squandering. The classical economists refuted fallacies in their own day, showing a policy of saving best serves the interest of the individual as well as the nation. They showed that the rational saver was helping and not hurting the whole community. Um, and so Hazlitt gives this example of the two brothers. I'm gonna read it out of the book just to because I felt like the whole reading of it was better than I could summarize it. So the two brothers are Alvin and Benjamin. So Alvin, the first brother, is a lavish spender. He spends not only by temperament, but on principle. He is a disciple to go no further back of Rodbertus. I don't know who that is. But anyway, who declared in the middle of the 19th century that capitalists must expend their income to the last penny in comforts and luxuries. For if they uh, for if they're determined to save goods, wait, sorry. For if they determine to save, goods accumulate, and part of the workmen will have no work. Alvin is always seen at the nightclubs. He tips handsomely, he maintains a pretentious establishment with plenty of servants. He has a couple of chauffeurs and doesn't stint himself in the number of cars he owns. He keeps a racing stable. He runs a yacht, he travels, he loads his wife down with diamond bracelets and fur coats. He gives expensive and useless presents to his friends. To do all this, he has to dig into his capital. But what of it? If saving is a sin, dissaving it must be a virtue. And in any case, he is simply making up for the harm being done by the saving of his pinch penny brother Benjamin. It need hardly be said that Alvin is a great favorite with the hat check girls, the waiters, and the restaurateurs, the furriers, the jewelers, the luxury establishments of all kinds. They regard him as a public benefactor. Certainly is obvious to everyone the employment in spreading his money around. Compared with him, brother Benjamin is much less popular. He is seldom seen at the jewelers, the furriers, or the nightclubs, and he does not call the head waiters by their first names, whereas Alvin spends not only the full $50,000 income each year, but is digging into capital besides. Benjamin lives much more modestly and spends only about $25,000. Obviously, think the people who see only what hits them in the eye, he is providing less than half as much employment as Alvin, and the other $25,000 is as useless as if it did not exist. But let us see what Benjamin actually does with this other $25,000. He does not let it pile up in his pocketbook, his bureau, I don't even know, his bureau drawers or in his safe. He either deposits it in a bank or he invests it. If he puts it either into commercial or a savings bank, the bank either lends it to going businesses on short term for working capital or uses it to buy securities. In other words, Benjamin invests his money either directly or indirectly. But when money is invested, it is used to buy or build capital goods, houses or office buildings or factories or ships or trucks or machines. Any one of these projects puts as much money into circulation and gives as much employment as the same amount of money spent directly on consumption. Saving, in short, in the modern world is only another form of spending. The usual difference is that the money is turned over to someone else to spend on means to increase production. So far as giving employment is concerned, Benjamin's saving and spending combined give as much as Alvin's spending alone, and put as much money in circulation. The chief difference is that the employment provided by Alvin's spending can be seen by anyone with one eye, but it is necessary to look a little more carefully and to think a moment to recognize that every dollar of Benjamin's savings gives as much employment as every dollar that Alvin throws around. A dozen years roll by. Alvin is broke. He no longer is seen in the nightclubs and at the fashionable shops, and those whom he formerly patronized when they speak of him refer to him as something of a fool. He writes begging letters to Benjamin, and Benjamin, who continues about the same ratio of spending to saving, not only provides more jobs than ever because his income through investment has grown, but through his investment he has helped to provide better paying and more productive jobs. His capital, wealth, and income are greater. He has, in brief, added to the nation's productive capacity. Alvin has not.
Yeah, and so it's just showing essentially how saving increases production over time, while squandering and dissaving reduces it.
Right. And putting your money in banks and such, they will lend out the money with interest, to and make some money back, and it will help increase the amount of money that was originally lent.
Not to mention that when you save money, you're like going to invest it into something that it's actually going to produce something, most likely. And when you just like spend all your money, you're just buying a bunch of stuff that you're going to use, and then it's, that's it. So when you just when people don't save, or when people don't have an incentive to save, they are just promoting consumerism, which is, as we've seen it, very not good for society.
Yeah, like mainstream culture and such just promotes spending money and buying things that you don't need rather than saving. And
Yeah, it's not that you like shouldn't spend. It's just that when people when people are discouraged to save money, they are encouraged to spend money on trivial things that they don't particularly need.
right, and you never know what's going to happen in the future. Like, you need to have something for backup just in case.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to bring up at the end of this, because I don't think he really deals with risk and such in this chapter. But an important use for saving is in case you lose your job, your business goes under, so on and so forth.
I believe he brings that up for a brief moment, but
Okay, I must have missed it when I was reading, but it
it's
was
really
just
brief.
yeah. Anyways, he talks about investment and such, but it's not like even if you were to put money under your bed, like that's a bad thing. Because no one is going to really do that with like 80% of their income or something like that.
Right. He actually, and he goes into that for a second, but like if somebody who did put most or almost all of their money in the under their bed or in stockings or whatever, like, and he dies and it's found, then it just gets, recirculated back into the economy by the people that find it.
Yep. And until it's not, it's a deflationary effect,
Mm-hmm.
which he doesn't really talk about. But deflation is a good thing because the people who have saved and were prudent get more, well, they get more wealth. They don't get more money. They have the same amount of money, but the money is worth more, and so they are worth more in terms of economic value.
Hmm. We just had not a super chat. We just had a chat in the thing and it faded away.
Yeah, so Goodcuff says the state encourages degeneracy by eliminating, or in some cases encouraging, the negative consequences of high time. And this is something I bring up all the time to people who aren't like classical liberal in terms of economics and that type of such, that are right wing or Christian. It's like the state is what's really encouraging all this degeneracy.
Right.
And so it's...
And we brought this up in... I'll let you finish. Sorry.
Yeah, so it's like you're going to try to use the instrument that is destroying, destroying what you want to see in order to try to bring it about. It just doesn't make any sense.
Right. Oh. And some of the chapters that we read have explained how, consumer goods, like increasing the prices of consumer goods or using tariffs or whatever, using these on goods that are necessary will lead to like the prices of things that are not necessary being incentivized, that aren't necessary being incentivized to be purchased over things that are more immediate and necessary.
Yep. He says this is Burt Grimm.
Oh, what's up?
People that we've met in the past like week or so on Twitter.
Yeah, dude's cool.
We've also talked before about how inflation is bad because of the opposite reason, because it devalues the money of people who are saving.
Yeah, this is also why deflation is not necessarily a bad thing, because it does encourage people to save and invest. Because even in our deflationary periods, it's never been like this rapid deflation. It's always been like 1 or 2 percentage points year on year, which is basically the less deflation than we have inflation right now. And so what that would do is encourage you to save. It would completely reverse all of the incentives, essentially. And people would save and invest, and that's how things... Well, many times in the 19th century in America, and look at what America did in the 19th century. We went from a nation that was not considered a world power or anything to being the #1 world economy at the end, at least by 1905. So it's how you build a nation is through saving and investment.
Yeah, because when you spend your money on consumer goods, you're going to consume those goods and they're not going to be used for anything further. They're not going to be used to produce anything, like I said. So,
Yep.
if everyone just spent their money and no one saved, there would be no new businesses and there would be no new production.
Right, so moving on. The word saving is used sometimes to mean mere hoarding of money, and sometimes it means investment, with no clear distinction consistently maintained between the two uses. Hoarding of cash, if it takes place rationally and on large scale in most economic situations, is harmful, but this hoarding is extremely rare. Something like this often happens after a downturn in business, but should be distinguished from a downturn in business. Consumptive spending and investment are both contracted. Consumers reduce their buying partly because they fear they may lose their jobs and they wish to conserve their resources. They have contracted their. Yep.
I couldn't hear consumer the first part of that sentence. So
Consumers reduce their buying.
Yeah, consumers will reduce their buying partly because they fear they may lose their jobs and they wish to conserve their resources. So I just wanted to make sure that got into the podcast and not just
okay.
Oh, it did.
Okay.
I heard it, don't worry.
Alright. Anyway, they have contracted thereby not because they wish to consume less, but because they wish to make sure that their power to consume will be extended over a longer period of time if they do lose their jobs. Consumers are also reduced their buying for another reason. Prices in goods have fallen and they fear a further fall. They do not want to have resources in falling goods, but in money that will be worth more in the future. The same... You had something to say?
Nope.
Oh, okay. The same reason prevents them from investing. They have lost their faith in the profitability of business, or that they at least believe that if they wait a few months, they can buy stocks or bonds for cheaper. We can assume that they either refuse to hold goods that may fall in value on their hands, or hoarding money itself for a rising value. It's a misnomer to call this temporary refusal to buy saving. It doesn't come from the same motives as normal saving. It is still more seriously false to say that this sort of saving is the cause of depressions. It is the opposite. It is the consequences. It is the consequence of depressions.
Right, and so when there's a depression, investment of money is not going to yield as good of a return. And so that's why you're not investing it. It has nothing to do with causing the depression. It is simply the consequence, as he stated.
Right. Don't think any more elaboration is needed on that. So, a refusal to buy may intensify and prolong the depression. When there is government intervention in business, and when business does not know what the government is going to do next, uncertainty is created. Profits are not reinvested, firms and individuals allow cash balances to accumulate in their banks, and they keep a larger reserve against contingencies. This hoarding of cash may seem like a cause of subsequent slowdown in business activity. The real cause, however, is the uncertainty brought about by government policies. Larger cash balances of firms and individuals are merely one link in the chain of consequences from that uncertainty. To blame excessive saving for the business decline would be like blaming a fall in the price of apples to the bumper crop, but not on the people who refuse to pay more to buy more apples. Once people have decided to deride a practice or an institution, any argument against it, no matter how illogical, is good enough. It is said that various consumer goods industries are built on the expectation of a certain demand, and if people start saving, they will disappoint this expectation and start a depression. The assertion rests on that of forgetting that what is saved on consumer goods is spent on capital goods, and that saving does not necessarily mean even a dollar's contraction in total spending. The only element of truth in the contention is that any change that is sudden may be unsettling. It would be just as unsettling to spend if spending was switched from one consumer's goods to another consumer's goods, or former savers suddenly switching their demand from capital goods to consumer goods. Anything to say on that? It would be unsettling, like whoever has invested a lot in like a certain product because the demand is telling them to do so, and then something were to happen, whether it be by government policies or just something happens, and people just switch to another product or whatever, it would be unsettling for them, because now what are they going to do when they have so much invested in the production of a certain good and it's not being bought now, just out of nowhere?
Yeah, and it's also just kind of restating that what is, saved is being spent on capital goods and not consumer goods. Like, it's just being spent elsewhere.
Right. Um, and I don't remember if he made the distinction between capital and consumer goods earlier on in the book. I forget, but I'll go ahead and I think he does later. I'll go ahead and say that capital goods are like machinery, houses, buildings, stuff that can be used to produce more consumers goods and other capital goods.
Well, any
And
capital goods or anything that can produce goods or services. So, a house can produce shelter, a car can produce transportation, a milling machine can produce AR-15 lowers. All of these things are examples of capital goods. Your shoes can provide you with protection as you walk around, so on and so forth. It's capital goods are so many things. Actually, the shoes probably wouldn't be a good example of capital goods.
I guess once you use them, you put them on your feet to protect your feet, but once they're worn out, there's not really any use for them after that.
Well, I mean, that's true with any capital good. Like, once a milling machine breaks down, it's not useful for building AR-15 lowers or anything.
Okay, that's a good point too.
Um, but it's
Okay.
anyways.
What?
It's just an interesting point that the people who are against saving don't really understand. It's no one to a large degree puts money under their bed like they imagine they do. It's always being spent, but just not on things you're going to consume, like a steak dinner. They're putting it, they're going to invest it in some stocks, which originally was a way of selling ownership in a company, like a certain percentage of ownership to raise funds. That's how it's still used, but most time when people buy stocks, it is on the secondary market, which we also can't ignore that the secondary market is somewhat why people buy primarily buy stocks from the company, is because they know they can sell it on the secondary market. So that helps increase the value of stocks.
Right. So,
So we're also going to be putting up a graph from the, a table from the book about saving. So when we get to that, it's going to be already up on the stream.
By the
Right, and I'm
way,
gonna
don't you
be
think
reading
it's
from the
maybe
book
a
I'm
good
editing.
idea to just give like a brief explanation of what the secondary market is? Because, like, I know what it is, sort of, but not exactly, and like
So
other
the
people
secondary
may not
market.
as well.
So
I think real quick, you should explain what the primary market is first, and then the secondary.
So as so the primary market is what I described. It was buying shares from a company, for that company. So buying a company's shares from that company. The reason why you buy them is either to get a dividend or to get percentage, a percentage share of a percentage ownership of the company. And so, however, the secondary market is people who buy shares from each other, but none of them own the or like on the board of executives in the company. And so that's the secondary market. It's just people passing around shares. And this is what you usually see in the stock market. But the primary market is buying or selling to the company back their shares, to the company. So the primary market is between the company that owns the shares, that the shares are a part of that company, and the people buying or selling the shares. And the secondary market is just two people buying and selling shares.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I
Hello.
put the graph, the table up. By the way, you should be able to see it on stream already.
Yep. I
All
also
right.
got a fingernail docs on the stream.
I was gonna say that. um. Okay.
Call it an
Real quick, let me just.
ethnicity check.
Oh.
Yep.
Just give me one quick second.
We're on 12.
Yeah. I'm looking at the book real quick, just so I can skim ahead and see where to stop on that. Okay, it's not that long. It's like a page, but
Yeah,
um
the savings table is 13, so that's why.
yeah. So another argument is that saving is silly. This argument is just plain naive and childish. It rests on the idea that if we keep on saving, we'll be baking a bigger and bigger cake to never eat.
Right, and it's also somewhat silly because think about let's say we're in a pizzeria, and assume we don't save at all. The big machine, the big oven that we use to cook the pizzas, eventually it's going to wear out and break. And if we have no savings, we're not going to be able to replace the oven, and so we'll no longer be able to make pizzas in our pizzeria. It's a very childish way of viewing the world because there's no forward planning taking place essentially, because you need to save in order to replace things as they break or as they need to be repaired.
Right. As well as, the possibility of other future
Right.
happenings.
Right. So I might start out with a simple oven like you see in a normal kitchen. Like you might have 2 or 3 single ovens. But then you might buy an industrial oven that is able to cook pizzas very quickly. And so it would require saving to buy that new oven, the industrial oven, and that will increase some productivity, make your business wealthier and so on and so forth. You'll be able to serve more customers and so forth.
Are you sure this is a
right.
good example?
What?
Nothing. I was just gonna make a really bad joke.
Oh, okay.
I know where you're going with that.
You could, yeah.
There's a joke in there somewhere. I'm just not gonna say it.
Yep.
So, moving on.
Yep. Of course, I only want to put pizzas in the oven.
There's no analogy there. Not at all. So, moving on to the graph, or the table, I'm going to be reading out of the book again, and then one more time in this chapter. So bear with me as I read like I'm in 5th grade. Let us picture to ourselves, then, a nation that collectively saves every year about 20% of all it produces in that year. This figure greatly overstates the amount of net saving that has occurred historically in the United States, but it is a round figure that is easily handled and gives the benefit of every doubt to those who believe that we have been oversaving. Now, as a result of this annual saving and investment, the total annual production of the country will increase each year. To isolate the problems we are ignoring for the moment, booms, slumps, and other fluctuations. Let us say that this annual increase in production is 2.5 percentage points. Percentage points are taken instead of a compounded percentage merely to simplify the arithmetic. The picture that we get for an 11-year period would then be something like this in terms of index numbers. And there you see there's the table. And you can see for the first year, the total production is 100. And then consumers' goods produced are 80, and the capital goods produced are 20. And you can see how every year that little bit of increase just adds up to more being produced each year, and as opposed to what would happen. Oh, sorry, I was just reading that that chat.
Yeah, we have a comment here. I'll read it for you guys. So he says, the Jim Jesus says that Hume's guillotine says that you can't say something ought to or should function a certain way simply because it can't define what it is. Checkmate, Hoppians.
Yeah, I was going to be doing a stream fairly soon on the first 2 videos. Just as they release them, because it requires so much unpackaging that I can't imagine doing it all at once, like I know someone else is gonna do. So yeah, but that's gonna be on my channel, not this one, because I am having like the one-man crusade against the agorists at the Hoppean.
Okay, so that chat had nothing to do with what we're talking about.
No. But it's relevant to what is going on in drama, essentially, surrounding some agorists taking shots at the Hoppians. And I wish that my article against the agorists came out when I wrote it, because now it seems like I wrote the article in response to Esso going after the Hoppians, instead of what actually happened was I wrote that a week before they made the live stream against the Hoppians.
Yeah.
Man.
So I was just kind of yeah, I do not like agorists. So
We noticed.
yep.
But you can see how in this table how over time saving yields more production. Which should be obvious to anybody in the first place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I understand the graph, but I'm not good at explaining stuff. So
Yeah, and so what it's showing is that there is a what it's showing is that there's a rate of return on your investment, and so that's why total production keeps on going up. And so as total production goes up, if you keep on the same ratio of saving and consumption, then this is what happens with a 20% saving ratio.
okay, that was simple. I'm just retarded and can't explain graphs.
Yep. Jim
So
Jesus says that Esso was going after Hoppeans before he started sucking off Gonkin, to be fair, so you can't win. I can understand that, but I don't think I've ever seen Esso not be a lefty, and so he's also one of those left libertarians like Konkin. So I don't know, going after Konkin is going to be going after some subsection of left libertarian, which Esso has always been. At least as far as I know, he's always been some type of left libertarian. So it's just kind of silly.
yeah. So let's continue on with this table. So I completely forgot that the following couple of paragraphs is explaining the table. But anyway, the first thing to be noticed about this table is that total production increases each year because of the saving, and would not have increased without it. It is possible, no doubt, to imagine that improvements and new inventions merely in replaced machinery and other capital goods of a value no greater than the old would increase the national productivity. But this increase would amount to very little, and the argument in any case assumes that enough prior investment to have made the existing machinery possible. The saving has been used year after year to increase the quantity or improve the quality of existing machinery, and so to increase the nation's output of goods. It is true, if that for some strange reason is considered an objection, a larger and larger cake each year. Each year, it is true, not all of the currently produced cake is consumed, but there is no irrational or cumulative restraint. For each year, a larger and larger cake is in fact consumed until, at the end of 11 years in our illustration, the annual consumer's cake alone is equal to the combined consumers' and producers' cakes of the first year. Moreover, the capital equipment, the ability to produce goods itself, is 25% greater than in the first year. Let us observe a few other points. The fact that 20% of the national income goes each year for saving does not upset the consumer's goods industries in the least. If they sold only the 80 units they produced in the first year, and there were no rise in prices caused by unsatisfied demand, they would certainly not be foolish enough to build their production plans on the assumption that they were going to sell 100 units in the second year. The consumer's goods industries, in other words, are already geared to the assumption that the past situation in regard to the rate of savings will continue. Only an unexpected, sudden, and substantial increase in savings would unsettle them and leave them with unsold goods. But the
Yeah.
same unsettlement... Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. Just before we get too far beyond the table, I wanted to just ask you a question. Is there a
Yep.
reason why the this is not exponential and is rather linear? Like, does he explain that, or?
What do you mean by exponential rather than linear?
So what I mean by a rate of return from the capital goods produced, which is your saving, is
Mhm.
that if, let's say, we had a 2.5 to 20 rate of return, which is fairly good, that would be about, what, a little bit over 10% rate of return. I would actually be 12.5% rate of return. The next year, when we go to 20.5, we'd also have that 12.5%. And so 12.5% of 20.5 would be bigger than 12.5% of 20. And so it wouldn't be 105, but it would be 105 point something. Do you see what I'm getting at?
Yeah. I don't think he goes into that, or explains why it wouldn't, why it wouldn't be a bigger increase rather than,
So this linear, because
I
if you look at the left, it's linear, but it really should be exponential. So
it
that's
kind of seems like a little bit of an error.
yeah. I was kind of letting you go through your points and seeing if I just misremembered something, but yeah, this should be the total production should be exponential.
Yeah, he's really underselling the point if he's doing that.
Yep.
I was looking up the graph. I was looking up the table earlier and being like, it's not. It shouldn't be like. It should be a bigger number than this, but I just kind of didn't know how to, put it into words. Like, what was exactly wrong with it.
Yep.
But yeah, it should the production should be much higher every time, every year.
But not much
After the
higher
first.
because, like, and the third year it should be 105 point something. It's at the beginning it won't seem like that big of a difference, but at the end it'll be a bigger difference because that's how exponential curves work.
Like the longer you go, the more drastic is gonna be the difference.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because this table is only like 11 years. So it's, I guess, a relatively short period of time. But if you keep this for like 50, 100
years, it's going to be crazy, and that's why if you look at GDPs, even if you try to get rid of the inflation aspect, seem to be exponential curves, like they curve upwards.
Yep.
And that's because of this mechanism we're talking about.
Right.
And that's also why, even like slight constraints to growth can end up making a huge difference.
Yep.
In the long run. Which is why you have, I guess some examples in the real world where you have countries who entered, I guess, quote unquote capitalism later than others, and you can see that the difference is pretty drastic if you look at, say, Southern Europe or Eastern Europe.
All the old commie bloc countries are so much poorer than the West, even though now they have better economic policies.
Yep. And they'll never really catch up with the West unless, something happens, because, the West is going to keep growing exponentially. And so are they if they have free economies, but, since they're already behind, they're going to be behind forever.
Not necessarily.
No, I know, like, not necessarily, but, if you just took, like, isolated examples, I guess.
Well, yeah, if everything else was equal, you would be correct, but
yeah,
Western,
I know it was like dumb, but I was just talking about, if you just take and give them, I guess, different starting points, and in like a theoretical example, the one with the latter starting point
higher starting point,
is always going to be behind. In the real world, not so much, because there's a lot more factors, and there's interaction between these countries. So, things change. But, if you're just taking a theoretical example, it's like you're having a race, and you're just giving, a head start to one country.
Yep.
And, if they're going at the same acceleration, they're the one who has a head start is always going to be in front.
Mm-hmm. Anyways.
Yep. And then.
Do you know where you are, Emo?
Yeah. I was gonna say, like, if something were to happen to, like, America and Britain and other much more advanced countries than, say, I don't know, like Hungary or Poland or something, which, I mean, they're not super far back, but they're still pretty, like, far back in terms of, how economically advanced they were. But if America were to somehow just be devastated, like, so if something were to happen, say, like, Soviet style Russia just appeared in, American politics and took over the entire economy, these countries, if that didn't happen to them, would grow, but in a different way.
Yeah, so what I was kind of getting at with the East and West is because the Western countries are becoming ever more interventionist and basically disruptive to the economy, whereas Eastern Europe is not. And so basically the rate of growth in the West is going to slow down, obviously, and the rate of growth in the East is going to be higher. And so they will be able to catch up, but it's not because of anything inherent about levels of wealth or anything like that. It has to do with the West kind of fucking itself over.
Yeah, you see this a lot with, the Nordic countries, I think, because they have always had very free economies.
They will have very free economies, and then they have periods of basically socialism where they kind of stagnate or start destroying their wealth.
Yeah, and more recently with all the globalist thing, they're starting to have more and more welfare and more immigration and more public spending as a whole, which is going to greatly constrain their economy in the future. In the Nordic countries and like Germany and France, they're able to afford this right now because of how strong their economies are, and because they had free economies for a very long time. They built up a lot of capital. But if they keep this up, forever, if they were to keep this up forever, they're gonna, lose space constantly, and eventually other countries who are more free are going to surpass them.
Yep.
All right. So moving on, I'll be done quoting this paragraph, and then we can move on to the next points. But the same unsettlement, as we have already observed, would be caused in the capital goods industries by a sudden and substantial decrease in savings. If money that would previously have been used for savings were thrown into the purchase of consumers' goods, it would not increase employment, but merely lead to an increase in the price of consumptive goods, and to decrease and to a decrease in the price of capital goods. Its first effect on net balance would be to force shifts in employment and temporarily to decrease employment by its effect on the capital goods industries, and its long-run effect would be to reduce production below the level that would otherwise have been achieved. So, anything to say about that before I move on to the next points?
Not really,
Nope.
no.
Okay. The enemies of saving began drawing a distinction, which is proper enough, between savings and investment. But when they start to talk as if the two were independent variables and as if it were merely an accident that they should ever equal each other, on one side are savers is sorry. 1 second. Okay. On one side are savers automatically and pointlessly continuing to save, and at the other side are limited investment opportunities that cannot absorb the saving. The result is stagnation. The only solution, they declare, is for government to expropriate these stupid and harmful savings and to invest in its own projects, even if these are only useless ditches or pyramid schemes to use up the money and provide employment. And that this harkens back to public works projects and creating employment for whatever industry might be losing losing business or something, like say constructionists or bridge builders and stuff like that.
Yep.
There is so much wrong in this that you can only point to a few of the main fallacies. Saving can only exceed investment only by the amounts that are actually hoarded in cash. Few people nowadays hoard their cash like that. To the small extent this does occur, it has already been reflected in the production plans of businesses and the price level. It is not ordinarily even cumulative, dishoarding as eccentric recluses die and their hoards are discovered and dissipated. Probably offset. he wrote this kind of weird. I can't say it without tripping myself up. Is not ordinarily even cumulative. Dishoarding as eccentric recluses die and their hoards are discovered and dissipated probably offsets new hoarding. I lost my spot again.
Don't worry.
Okay. In fact, the whole amount involved is probably insignificant in its effect on business activity. If money is kept either in a savings bank or commercial banks, the banks are eager to lend and invest. They cannot afford to have idle funds. The only thing that will cause people generally to try and increase their holdings of cash, or that will cause banks to hold funds idly and lose the interests on them, is fear that prices of goods are going to fall, or the fear of banks that they will be taking too great a risk with their principal. But this means the sign of depression has already appeared and have caused the hoarding, not that the hoarding has started the depression.
Yeah, but I think this is what we talked about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
About risk and such.
Yep. Savings and investment are brought into equilibrium the same way that supply and demand of any commodity are brought into equilibrium. We may define savings and investment as constituting the supply of and demand for new capital. And just as supply and demand for any other commodity are equalized by price, The supply of and demand for capital are equalized by interest rates. The interest rates is merely a special name for the price loaned of capital. It is a price just like any other. There is a psychopathic fear of excessive interest rates. It is argued if the interest rates are too high, it will not be profitable for industry to borrow and invest in new plants and machines. This argument has been so effective that governments everywhere have pursued artificial cheap money policies. The argument and its concern with increasing demand for capital overlooks the effects of these policies on the supply of capital. It is another example of the fallacy of looking at the effects of a policy only on one group and forgetting the effects on another group. If interest rates are artificially kept too low in relation to risks, there will be a reduction in both saving and lending. The cheap money proponents believe that saving goes on anyway, regardless of the interest rate, but the rich have nothing else they can do with their money. They do not stop to tell us at precisely what income level a man saves a fixed minimum amount, regardless of their interest rate or their risk at which he can lend it. The fact is, the amount saved by the very rich is doubtless affected much less proportionately than that of the moderately well-off by changes in the interest rate. Everyone's savings is affected in some degree. To argue on the basis of an extreme example that the volume of real savings would not be reduced by a substantial reduction in interest rate is like saying that the total production of sugar would not be reduced by a substantial fall of its price, because the efficient low-cost producers would still raise as much as before. The argument overlooks the marginal saver as well as the great majority of savers. Keeping interest rates artificially low is eventually the same as that is keeping any other price below the natural market level. Increases demand and reduces supply. An increase in demand for capital and hold on. Voice notes are very helpful, but sometimes it makes the sentence completely unintelligible.
Yeah. Don't worry.
Yeah, we should all be used to me being retarded by now. An increase in the demand for capital, and it reduces the supply of real capital. It creates economic distortions. It encourages borrowing and speculative ventures that cannot continue outside the conditions that gave them birth. On the supply side, the artificial reduction of interest rates discourages normal thrift, saving, and investment. It reduces the accumulation of capital. It slows down that increase in productivity, the economic growth that progressives profess to so eagerly promote. The money rate can be kept artificially low only by continuous new injections of currency or bank credit in place of real savings. This creates the illusion of more capital, just as the addition of water can create the illusion of more milk. But it is a policy of continuous inflation. It is obviously a process of increasing danger. The money rate will rise and a crisis will develop if the inflation is reversed or merely brought to a halt or even continued at a diminishing rate. Yes, Colton?
I'm trying to figure out when you're gonna end this talk so I can go on my tangent. So keep on going.
He just had like a huge gasp.
Yeah. Let me do the next point.
I was getting ready to speak. And then I was like, wait a minute. Like,
It sounded
You
like he
gotta.
was about to roast you.
Yeah, no.
I deserve it. Go ahead and say what you got to say.
So I was gonna bring up the Austrian business cycle and how all of this is. He's not really talking about it, but this disaster he's alluding to is basically what it is. It's so businesses need to figure out, and people in general need to figure out how much money to save and how much money to consume. And by this credit expansion, what's going on is that this decision-making process is being interrupted. It's actually being manipulated. And so what's going to end up happening is that because of the interest rates being so low, people are going to put more and more resources into long-term projects that are not desired. Because these low interest rates are a signal in a free market economy. They are a signal that there's a lot of saving, which means that people are deferring consumption, which means that you should put more money into long-term projects because eventually consumers are going to spend the money that they are saving. But that's not what's actually going on. So when these long-term projects come to fruition, there will not be that saving for people to then consume in the future. And so all of these long-term projects will not be profitable.
Right.
And that's where you get your boom and bust. The boom is in putting resources into these long-term projects, and the bust is when people figure out that they are not profitable. Did I explain that well?
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. I know that Hayek was it Hayek that did the thing on boom and bust cycles?
No,
That
that
was
was.
like one of his main contributions.
I'm fairly certain that was Mises. Hayek is more known for his knowledge. That's a big thing about Hayek. More about
You cut out for a second.
the big difference between Mises and Hayek is Mises is more about practical and real things, and Hayek is more about knowledge, wills, and other such things. It's a real shame that Hayek went away from economics and went more towards political philosophy because he just can't do it.
Yeah. I still wonder like why he went that direction. It kind of seems like he was trying to take people away from Keynes more than he was trying to actually be right.
Well, it has to do with his strategy for creating a libertarian revolution. His strategy was to infiltrate academia, to get more academics to be Austro-libertarians. Then they would become journalists who would then espouse Austro-libertarian theory to the masses. So in order to do that, he needed to come up with a theory that wouldn't be too radical for most academics. And that's kind of why he became a social democrat.
That's unfortunate.
So most people, when they think of most academics, when they think of libertarianism, they think of Hayek now, and so they're basically thinking of a social democrat. But he just really likes liberty and free markets.
Yeah, I actually saw a post the other day. from some Hayek page that I still follow on Facebook, and they were posting about why Hayek supported universal basic income, and I just like almost lost it.
Yep. It's I won't say that it's only because he wanted to gain acceptance, but that was a big reason why he came up with the theory he did. Liberty.
You're cutting in and out a bunch.
In the Constitution of Liberty, that's a big reason why um he created the definition of liberty that he did, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I still haven't burned my copy.
Yep, I never bought it. I only have the Road to Serfdom, and that's a much better book. Like, all of these non-Misesians, non-Rothbardians, they're very, very good at criticizing what's going on in the world. Like Milton Friedman, he is amazing at telling you why unions suck. But he has stuff like the negative income tax, so it's just like, and the student loans. Like, the reason why we have student loans is because of Milton Friedman. And so Milton Friedman would always come up with some government program that would be slightly better than straight up welfare. But it's just like, it comes from the Chicago school. Someone described it to me earlier this week that it's all about results and not about just don't care about assumptions. But by not caring about assumptions, you can't really build a logical framework to, you can't build the framework. You can only look at results, and so you can really criticize things that are happening, but you can't really have a solution.
Yeah, there was actually when I was watching some videos for another chapter we did earlier on, a Milton Friedman clip came up, and it had something to do with tax money going to government employees and how it's just wasting money. But he was like, that's a fallacy because the money that goes to these government employees is still getting recirculated back into the economy. And I was just like, that doesn't sound right. That money, by its very nature, is being coerced against the taxpayer's will, and then not all of it's even being put back into the economy in an efficient way. Like, they might be getting paid and buying consumer goods and stuff, but it's not going into capital goods or anything like that. And a lot of it is just being, held by the government and spent on, useless projects or war or other things.
By his own argument there, we should have a redistribution of wealth because that will help circulate money in the economy.
Yeah, that clip came up, and I was just like, "You're a good economist, I guess, but just the solutions or the defense you have for government programs is just it doesn't seem like all the way thought out."
It's not, and it has to do with the very basis of Chicago School economics. And I would love to be able to get what their philosophy is, how they view epistemology. But I don't think they really have that, just because I don't think that they've really thought about it. Like the Misesians have.
Mm-hmm.
And
what is epistemology? I feel like I should know this by now.
Epistemology, like the straight definition, the literal definition, is the study of knowledge. And so what it really is the study of how we get knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
So what a Misesian would be is a rationalist. He is able to start from a priori truths to build logical frameworks to get conclusions, like the law of demand in human action. Like, if you read anything from a Misesian or Austrian school, what you're going to get is the basis of it is all starting with an a priori truth like human action and deriving some conclusion to it. The then there's logical positivists who believe that all truth is based on a posteriori, a posteriori, which means after experience. So it's all based on observation.
So, as opposed to,
A priori means before experience, essentially. And so,
right.
you don't have to know anything about the world to know that the a priori truth is true. Meanwhile, a posteriori truth is like the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. There's no logical reason why that has to be. It just is.
Right. You could almost say it's, would it be wrong to say a priori is almost a tautology?
No, because a tautology is true because it's defined that way. So the if we define a sky to be blue, and then we say the sky is blue, well, that's a tautology because the sky is defined as, as being blue.
Right.
So that's the difference between logical proofs, like showing that P implies R, and saying that P is P.
Okay.
Where P is some proposition.
All right.
I can't really think of a good tautology right now, but it would be
Three is a number.
Yeah, 3 is odd. Or something like that.
Okay.
Actually, no, would that be a tautology? I am way too tired to think about all these
My bad. You must be looking it up.
Okay, so a tautology is it will either rain tomorrow or it will not rain tomorrow. Another tautology is Trump will win the election or Trump will not win the election.
Okay.
It's things that the statement is always true. I could also say that Emo will win the presidential election or Emo will not win the presidential election because you either win or you don't. Right?
Right.
And so it's a
It's pretty much just a statement that's always true.
Yeah. So that's the big difference between a tautology and that's why saying something's a tautology means it's meaningless.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, you wouldn't say that all of praxeology is meaningless.
Okay.
That's because praxeology is not about tautologies. about something entirely different.
All right. I forgot how we got on that subject.
We started talking about Milton Friedman. We started talking about Hayek, which brought up Milton Friedman, which brought up Chicago School, which brought up Chicago School epistemology, which brought up which you asked if a priori truths through argumentation bringing about conclusions would be a tautology. No, that's not what it is. It's a Anyways, that's just what happened. Mario says, so a yes or no question. A yes or no question is not a statement, so it can't be a yes or no. A tautology can't be a yes or no question. It is, so it has to be some type of statement that is always true.
So it can be that if you say 3 is a number or 3 is odd, things like that are tautologies as well.
Sounds about right. I'd have to.
I feel like there's a slight bit of nuance in what a tautology is compared to how I'm, I guess, assuming that might be the case.
Yeah.
No, I think just saying that 3 is a number isn't like a tautology,
I can give you,
because it depends on, I guess, what 3 is, and it depends on the definition of number.
Yeah.
So
a
tautology is always like something either is this or it's not. So if he said like
3 is either a number or not a number.
Yeah, 3 is either a number or not a number. That would be a tautology, because there's no way independent of what the definition of number and what the definition of 3 is. That's always going to be true.
Thank you,
Does that
Rod.
make sense?
Yes. I don't know if you caught the joke there.
So the logical framework for tautology is for P is some proposition. So a tautology would be my real name is Colton, or my real name is not Colton.
Okay.
Yeah. So it has to be true regardless of what his name is. That's why it's a tautology. It's like supposed to be redundant.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I tried to when I was reading Human Action, I was having to look up a lot of these concepts a lot, and it's a lot of them.
That's Colton Banks, not Jesus.
What? But who will build the Woo-Wall Railroad?
Yep.
That's mean. Okay, let's move on. We've been on a tangent for a minute now. The money rate can be kept artificially low only by continuous new injections of currency or bank credit in place of real savings. This creates the illusion of more capital, just as the addition of water can create the illusion of more milk. But it is the policy of continuous inflation. It is obviously the process of increasing danger. The money rate will rise, and a crisis would develop if the inflation is reversed or merely brought to a halt or even continued at a diminished rate. New injections of currency or bank credit can at first bring about lower interest rates, but continuing this process must have been must surely increase interest rates. Because new injections of money tend to lower the purchasing power of money, lenders then come to realize that the money they lend today would buy back less a year from now than when they would get it back. So to compensate, they add a premium to make up the loss in their money's purchasing power. This premium can be high depending on the extent of the expected inflation. If no effort is made to tamper with money rates through inflationary governmental policies, increased savings create their own demand by lowering interest rates in a natural manner. The greater supply of savings seeking investment forces savers to accept a lower rate. But lower rates also mean that more enterprises can afford to borrow because their prospective profit on the new machines or plants they are like or plants. Sorry. But lower rates also mean that more enterprises can afford to borrow because their prospective profit on the new machines or plants. They are with the proceeds seem likely to exceed what they would have to pay for borrowed funds. There is a frequent assumption that there is a fixed limit to the amount of new capital that can be absorbed, or even that the limit of capital expansion has already been reached. Almost all of the wealth of the modern world consists of accumulated capital. This capital is made up in part of many things that might be better called consumers' durable goods, such as automobiles, refrigerators, furniture, schools, colleges, churches, libraries, hospitals, and above all, private homes. Never in the history of the world has there been enough of these. Even if there were enough homes from a purely numerical point of view, qualitative improvements are possible and desirable without definite limit in all but the very best houses. The second part of capital is what we may call capital proper. It consists of the tools of production, including everything from the crudest axe, knife, or plow to the finest machine or the greatest electric generator, or to the most wonderfully equipped factory.
So I see we got the two plebs talk news gang here.
Oh, we do?
Yeah, well, at least people from the live streams.
Okay.
Culledson Banks and Ghostly Gun are both from that group.
Okay. I know who.
I wonder if it's because we mentioned Milton Friedman in the Chicago school.
I know of the two plebs, but I haven't really watched them.
Yep,
So
I've had to cool off on their content just to get other things going.
yeah.
And now you're seeing the results of that.
I lost my spot again, and I misspelled something. Okay, there we go.
And
Here to oh
TJ is another one of my names, so that's why they're calling me TJ.
Okay,
Is
so
Nope in
anyway,
a wheelchair? Or I haven't kept up with Nope either.
continuing on. Here too, quantitatively and especially qualitatively, there is no limit to the expansion that is possible and desirable. There will not be a surplus of capital until the most backward country is as well equipped technologically as the most advanced. Until the most efficient factory in America is brought abreast of the factory with the latest and finest equipment, and until the most modern tools of production have reached a point where human ingenuity is at a dead end and can improve them no further. As long as these conditions remain unfulfilled, there will be an indefinite room for more capital. And how can additional capital be absorbed? How can it be paid for? If it is set aside and saved, it will absorb and pay for itself. Producers invest in new capital goods in that they buy new and better tools because these reduce the cost of production. They either bring into existence goods that completely unaided hand labor could not bring into existence at all, and this includes most of the goods around us, such as books, typewriters, automobiles, locomotives, and suspension bridges. Remember, this book is kind of old, so that's why these examples are kind of dated. Or they can increase enormously the quantities in which these things are produced, or they can reduce the unit costs of production. As there is no assignable limit to the extent to which unit costs of production can be reduced, until everything can be produced at no cost at all, there is no assignable limit to the amount of new capital that can be absorbed. Reduction of unit costs of production by the addition of new capital does either one of two things or both. It reduces the cost of goods to consumers, and it increases the wages of labor that uses the new equipment because it increases the productive power of that labor. Thus, a new machine benefits both the people who work on it directly and the great body of consumers as well. In the case of consumers, we say either that it supplies them with more and better goods for the same money, or that it increases their real incomes. And then he gives an example in the book in the auto industry. Did you have something you wanted to say real quick?
Nope.
Okay.
Well, getting to the end of this chapter, it's been a very, very long chapter.
Oh yeah, it was. Let me just make sure I find Okay, here we go. A typical illustration is the automobile business. The American automobile industry pays the highest wages in the world, and among the very highest even in America. Yet, until about 1960, American motor car makers could undersell the rest of the world because their unit cost was lower. And the secret was that the capital used in making American automobiles was greater per worker and per car than anywhere else in the world. And yet there are people who think that we have reached the end of this process, and still others who think that even if we haven't, the world is foolish to go on saving and adding to its stock of capital. It should not be difficult to decide, after our analysis, with whom the real lies. However, it is true that the US has been losing its world economic leadership in recent years, but because of our own anti-capitalist governmental policies and not because of economic maturity. And that is the end of the chapter. The video is lagging on my screen.
The connection seems to be fine over here.
Okay, it might just be my
Yeah,
it
if you
just might be
guys
my
if you guys are
Xbox.
having problems with the stream, if it's laggy or anything, just let me know in the chat, and I'll see if I can do something.
All right.
The reason why they say scarcity isn't a thing is because they believe scarcity is a invention by capitalists.
Oh
Wait.
yeah, I saw that argument like on Twitter a few days ago, like unironically.
Oh,
Well,
I
no,
saw that.
it's what the utopian socialists believe. It's the utopian socialists happened before Marx, so
Yeah.
Oh yeah, they believe. I guess they believe that there's just an infinite amount of resources.
yep. If only we didn't have property rights. Right.
If yeah. So do we have anything to say about the end of chapter 23? Save your money, especially now.
Yep.
Yeah, it's gonna get although it's kind of interesting because you probably shouldn't save in cash money.
Yeah, no, it's there's gonna be a lot of inflation, so just don't save cash, but save capital. Whether it's precious metals or land or something that's gonna be worth something.
Glad you didn't bring up Bitcoin.
Yeah, no, not Bitcoin.
Okay, so let's start with chapter 24, the lesson restated. Economics is the science of recognizing secondary consequences. It is the science of tracing the effects of some supposed or existing policy not only on some special interest in the short run, but in the interest in the long run. It's the science of recognizing inevitable implications, as it claims that such insights correspond with common sense. A little philosophy inclineth man's mind to atheism, but depth in philosophy inclineth a man's mind to religion, by Francis Bacon. As such, a little economics leads a man to absurd conclusions, but depth in economics leads him to common sense. I think that this is giving far too much credit to commoners, who are often deceived by absurd conclusions. It is precisely because of Hazlitt's education that he has such a sense of economic realities. I would call this uncommon sense.
Yeah, there's a somebody had said on Twitter that most people are actually fascists but don't even realize it.
In terms of them being, depends what you really mean by fascists. If you mean corporatists, or then yes, they really are.
I'm going with that definition mostly.
But yeah, no, there's so much stupidity, retardation, that type of stuff.
Yeah.
So economic will likely never come about in a uniform way. Thus, the antagonism between a specific group and the whole community is going to persist. Diffuse gains do not grab the attention of the disinterested observer. Like concentrated losses, lower prices for a product do not grab headlines as much as some inefficient producers. No longer being in business, or workers being replaced by labor-saving devices. The downsides of economic advancement need to be addressed, but the solutions are often worse than the downsides. It is wealth. It is the theory of wealth through scarcity. The generalized form of the lesson is that things may seem to be true when we concentrate on a small economic group. Sorry. The generalized form of the lesson is that things that may seem to be true when we concentrate on a single economic group will seem to be illusions when the interests of everyone, as consumer no less than as producer, are considered.
Right, and that's a theme that plays out throughout the entire book. Hello.
So, yeah, hello. Yeah, it's basically what we've been seeing throughout the entire book is that when people analyze policies, they really only think about what is being told to them in the proposal by special interest groups and not thinking about the implications of such a policy. Also, Ghostly and Carlton. Hopefully, my speech impediment has gotten better. I've been working on that.
Oh yeah, I saw that. That was mean.
It was pretty funny, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Fuck him, Colton. Fuck him.
yeah, it's been something I've been working on, so it's just a they know me from what, like 2 years ago is when I last talked to them. But if it gets better, we can't bully you anymore. Right, but isn't that why you want to bully me? Going with Dawn's theory about bullying, that it actually helps people. Not saying it's true or false. I'm just saying that's, what Dawn thinks.
The academic agent has also adopted that theory too. He thinks bullying is a net positive and builds character. It's kind of hard to disagree.
I don't think it's like something that's inherently true. I mean, I guess it kind of depends on the person. Some people will take, bullying very differently than others, because some people are just gonna internalize everything and like accept it, like that's just how it is. And in that case, it can be, more destructive than otherwise. But for you, like most people, I guess normal people, if you're getting bullied for something, you're gonna stop whatever that is.
Yeah.
So in most cases, if as long as the bullying is justified, and you're not bullying someone for something that's dumb, but like, I don't know, bullying someone because they're a virgin, and then if you're bullying for things that are, deserving of bullying, I guess it could be helpful.
The kind of perspective I have on this is that the people who have a healthy perspective on bullying would likely have a healthy perspective on other forms of being told they need to improve.
Guys are gonna blow up the chat. I know mine's coming through like 30 seconds behind, so.
Yep.
Yeah,
what letter are they?
I think we're
what letter are they
on?
on?
A bit of buffering, maybe. I'm not sure. Because YouTube says that YouTube says that it's not receiving enough video to maintain smooth streaming, but I'm not entirely sure why. Because my Discord connection is fine, and the connection in OBS is also fine, so I'm not sure what's wrong.
Yeah, my screen was just lagging again for a minute. Well, not for a minute.
Oh, it looks like it's back to normal now. Maybe it was just YouTube.
Okay, well, I don't think he was cutting out when we were saying anything important.
Yeah.
So,
Yep. So, that is the conclusion of the book. Typically we would have, well, the plan is to have a conclusion for each book, but the book kind of already did that for us, didn't it?
yeah,
Pretty much.
and
I mean, the last
almost
chapter
every
was
chapter.
basically that, yeah.
Yeah, and every chapter pretty much restated the same thing. In one way or another, is that pretty much every government policy put in place to help a certain industry, a certain producer, a certain group of producers, or even to allegedly help consumers as well. All these things add.
They do more harm than good.
They
Yeah,
impoverish.
they do more harm than good, and then they compound on top of one another.
Also, screw the unions.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I think one important thing to mention is that isn't what Emo just said, is that, they like basically add to one another and help destroy the economy from, different sides. So you have these, for instance, just as a quick example, when you have taxation, excessive taxation, and you have welfare. And what you're basically doing is, you're redistributing wealth one way or another. And then you also have things like minimum wage, or like high minimum wage, or something else related to employment. So what you're doing is, at the same time that you are, discouraging people from hiring by having high wages, you're also discouraging people from working by having, welfare. And, that's obviously very bad, because if people have no incentive to work, they're not going to work, and there's not going to be production, and then there's not going to be economic growth. And as well as, you're just increasing taxation, and it's gonna make it very expensive for people to start new businesses and invest in other things. So it's also making, that you're also discouraging savings, which is what we talked about in the beginning of this episode. So it's, just a bunch of different policies that all bind together and contribute to the same issues.
Right, and then if a bunch of policies are kept in place for too long, such as, say, FDR's New Deal, people nowadays see that as like the very bedrock of what should be there in the first place, and that instead of removing that, more things need to be continuously added onto it.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm not sure if you guys remember, but I think it was last week where I briefly explained the concept of a 13th salary, which we have here in Brazil, which is, a completely absurd concept of just having an extra salary for literally no reason other than to, quote unquote, drive up wages. And it's just existed for such a long time, and it's such a, set in stone concept, a part of our economy, even though it makes absolutely no sense and isn't present in any other major economy. it's just something that, even the mention of removing it, getting rid of it, people, get outraged because they think that, you're literally gonna enslave them or something. So there are just a bunch
How
of
can you be
concepts.
anti-label?
Wait, I'm sorry, you cut out a
How
little
can
bit.
you how can you be anti-label?
Yeah. So yeah, there are a bunch of concepts like that which are just so set in stone, unfortunately, that people will think you're insane for opposing them, even though the concepts themselves often make absolutely no sense. Like money printing.
Like people just be like, think like, oh, well, we need this green piece of paper to survive, and we're born into these, I guess, systems. Um, at least a lot of us are born into these systems in, the modern era, and this is all we know. How could anything be any different?
Yeah, and that's
And that's
actually how
that's
how the system survives and how the system grows. Because the people need to, think that they depend on the system in order to keep it going, in order to be loyal to it.
right. And
And this
then
is this is probably a little bit of a tangent, but it ties perfectly into the concept of bio-Leninism, which I was discussing not long ago on Twitter with Jared and a few other people, which is, just vaguely explaining the concept is that, revolutionary leftist movements are always made up of, the worst people in society, or in that specific society. So, in Soviet Russia and pre-revolutionary Russia, it was, um, basically people from like the satellite states or satellite parts of the empire, and low-wage workers and etc. And nowadays in America, it's, um, the women and the minorities, the ethnic minorities, the gender minorities, and all those other I guess groups. And because these people are naturally less likely to succeed in a free system than, straight white men, they are almost inherently more loyal to the system because they depend on it to be anything more than that what they would achieve otherwise. So you're not just propping up bad behavior, you're propping up like the worst behavior in all of society, and you are basically rewarding it. You're creating an aristocracy of all the people that would not and likely should not be anything of importance.
yeah, I've been meaning to watch Charlemagne's video on bio-Leninism. The academic agent has discussed it and said after he watched the video that he just can't look anywhere without seeing it now.
Yep, I
Also,
can't. I can't either. I read about it a while ago because I've been following Spandrel, which is the guy who coined the term, for a while, and it's just one of those things that once you see it, you realize that it makes complete sense, and all of this is like orchestrated, and all of these people are just doing this because it's their only hope of being uh, anything more than what they're supposed to be.
also speaking of the dregs of society, can you bring up the pick?
Okay, give me a second. Why is it not letting me save it? What the fuck? Why is it's I'm not able to download it for some reason. Oh, never mind. It worked, I think. Oh no, it didn't.
Is this the?
Oh,
Oh,
there
you
we
just
go.
put it in the
It's in the
chat.
book
What am
club.
I looking at?
Tell me when it's up.
Yeah, it's up now. Sorry,
Um,
I was having a little bit of trouble downloading it for some reason.
keep moving, protesters. This is our neighborhood.
That is such a good picture.
Yep. What ended up happening is that the protesters started going to the suburbs to quote unquote inconvenience white people. And so white people came out of their houses with guns.
Yeah.
And then the protesters just went away. It was like, we don't want any of that smoke.
This picture, for some reason, this picture reminds me of Scarface. You know, like the
Very,
movie.
very, very white collar, but strapped.
Yeah.
Yep.
The way the lady's holding the gun is just funny too. And the dude just looks like he walked out of church. And
Yeah, the way the dude is holding the gun too, and like I don't know, this like house in the background, it just really reminds me of Scarface. It's like he's just gonna go say hello to my little friend.
Yeah, no, the wife is probably not used to holding guns and whatnot.
Oh, I'm gonna put up Phone Ost's version.
I haven't seen that one.
Look in
I didn't even
the
see this one
Discord.
first.
Yep. So, you know.
There we go. We're gonna end the stream on that image.
Yep.
What's
It's
the
so funny that the protesters finally went to the suburbs after threatening it for years, you know, back in Ferguson and such. But what ended up happening was that they realized that white people in mainly Republican areas have guns, and they're not going to let you go Molotov cocktail their house.
Yeah.
So
Yep. So, do we have anything more we need to say?
nope. That's why I started bringing it up, because it was a it's time to end the stream.
I just want to make a quick comment before we end it.
Yep.
It's loosely related to what we were talking about bio-Leninism just now, and how, you know, non-free economies prop up bad people, bad behavior. I was like, I became an ANCAP in like 2016, like a lowbird type, like like the ANCAP ball type, you know. And ever since then, I've been, you know, very attached to Austrian economics, even if I haven't read that much about it, like in depth. But I've always been really attached to it, and it's. Back then I used to just support it because I thought that it was the most efficient way to grow a nation, and you know, it is. And that was the main reason I supported it, and it's still the reason but nowadays the main reason I support it is just because I've realized that the people who are doing well and who are getting places in our current economies and in other economic systems are just not the people who deserve it.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Like,
that's a good point too.
yeah, like if you just, and this is getting worse because now you see that, you know, all these people who are white, who are conservatives, or who do anything that would warrant their a bad label, like racism, or like being labeled a racist or homophobe or something like that, and that's, you know, enough to ruin their careers, or, you know, to deny them a career entirely. And, you know, that just leaves it so the only people who are able to have economic success are, you know, leftists. It's not so bad yet, but if the current trends continue, we're gonna get to the point, and that's where they want to get, where white men basically just, you know, they're denied a career, they're denied any economic success, and yeah, the people who are getting it instead are really not the people who would have it in a natural, unrestricted order. So they just don't
Cough.
deserve it.
Cough.
Right.
Affirmative action. Cough.
Yeah.
And
It's
This
not
is,
just it's not just affirmative action for minorities and for other groups. It's also, you know, negative action against the group that would naturally be on top, or at least
Well,
would naturally be more prominent.
because of scarcity, affirmative action for one group is negative action for another group.
Yep. Yeah, but I'm talking about, you know, there's actual, like, negative action, even if it's not institutional, with, you know, cancel culture and whatnot.
Oh yeah. That exists as well, but it's just a
It's not institutional yet.
I would say that affirmative action is institutional racism.
No. I'm talking about,
against-
like, cancel culture and, you know, being denied a career because of something you believe in. At least not in the United States, because I've seen that, you know, in places like the UK and stuff, you can already, like, be denied, like, their public healthcare system. You can be denied services because of your beliefs and whatnot.
Yeah, they
I
started
remember
doing that.
reading about that. Like, if you are a racist or something, like, I mean, and by if you are a racist, I mean if they consider you a racist, because, you know, that's what matters. You can be denied a NHS service or something like that, which is, you know, absurd. If
Yeah, I think that went into effect last year, or at least it was proposed last year. I can't remember which,
yeah,
but all this. Go ahead, Colton.
that wouldn't be too bad if you also didn't have to pay taxes for it.
yeah, no, that then it
Yep.
would be fine, but you still have to pay for it. So
Yeah.
Yep. And this goes back to taxation as the beginning of degeneracy, because the the system of governance itself is based on immorality via extortion. Then why would society be moral if the authority is not moral itself? And then all this just leads to expanding immorality and degeneracy and morals.
yeah, I think that's a very good point. And in less corrupt countries, like most of, you know, Europe, most of the West, and the United States, which, you know, are still corrupt, but if you compare it to, you know, other elsewhere, they're relatively not corrupt. But, you know, I see this a lot here in Brazil, which is a notoriously corrupt country, notoriously corrupt government, every branch of it. And what happens is just people have, you know, most people have absolutely no faith in the powers, the the legal powers, the legal institutions, and they a lot of people just hope that eventually a magic candidate is gonna show up and fix everything, which will never happen. But in the meantime, what the thought process of a lot of people is just, everybody in the government is corrupt and everybody steals. No one is moral, so why should I be? And that's why you have a lot of people, committing crime and partaking in fraud and, extortion, those kinds of things.
All right. That thought process of the right candidate is just going to come in and fix everything is very prevalent in America as well. But can we wrap up this tangent?
Yeah, of course.
I don't have anything else to say.
All right. Do you have anything to say, Kyle?
Nope.
Okay. So that was our stream. Of course, we always have other things to talk about, as we talked about with Jim Jesus and stuff at the end. I believe we continued to talk about bio-Leninism from last week.
Yep.
So...
Well, last week we didn't talk about bio-Leninism, we just talked about the system.
We talked
a
about the
little bit.
cathedral.
Yeah, the cathedral. But, connected problems, connected concepts.
Yeah.
But anyways, that's it for the stream, and we'll see you guys in 2 weeks from now, not next week, because we're taking a week off between books.
Yep.
All right.
You know
All
what
right.
time it is?
Shill time.
Yeah. So who wants to go first?
I am Colton. I'm at Hetsu very much. I can also be seen at thehoppean.org.
Yeah.
My article against Agorist is now the highlighted featured article.
You want to tell us a little bit about future articles or anything about the website?
Real quick.
will
Okay,
be
never
about
mind. You moved it.
future articles will be about individualism and a follow-up to my strategy article. Emo, do you have any articles in the works?
I don't. I've been reading and working.
Okay.
I have one that I submitted, which I'm not sure when it's going to come out, and which is about why I think Donald Trump is going to win the election, and why the system benefits from having a white conservative in power more than it would if it had a progressive candidate in power. I don't know when that's coming out, but it should come out eventually.
Yep.
And I also have a new very, very quick, very short article on my own website, which is like 400 words, so it's, like a 2-minute read, which is just about why we should avoid infighting and right-wing movements.
Alright. And
But yeah, my Twitter is also there on the top right corner. It's at UFFC Kyle.
Right. And I'm Emo Hoppean 346. That's also my Twitter handle. And as usual, I'm just gonna shill Mises.org and the Hoppean.org. Go to those sites and read their articles. They're all excellent and they're never wrong about anything. Ever.
and I think that does it for the stream.
Yep.
All right, later everybody.
Good night.